Hello Internet, AdoptedMike here, and in this video we're going to take a look at this ASRock board for AMD socket AM4. This is a B450 board, as you can see here, and it's the B450M-HDV, and the M telling us this is a micro ATX board. We've also got Ryzen 2000 series ready, so the BIOS shipping on this is Ryzen 2000 series. So for 3000 series processors, you may need a BIOS update depending on when you buy the motherboard. It may or may not have the correct version for a 3000. But for 1000 and 2000 right off the bat, this board will work for those. We take a look at the back here. We can see a picture of the board and then some general specifications, but we can learn a heck of a lot more when we dive in. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the box and we'll see what this includes. So first off here we've got a user manual with a driver disk, although it is best if you can to pull the drivers online or offline, I guess, depending on how you look at it, for this motherboard, as the ones online could be updated. We've got two SATA cables here, 6 gigabit a second. One is a right angle and the other one is just straight. Then we've got a, this is for an M.2 SSD or PCI Express SSD. This is a screw to screw it down to the appropriate place on the motherboard. We've got a rear I/O shield of just the standard variety, and then we've got the motherboard. So let's take a closer look. So here is the board out of the bag. We'll go over some of the features here quickly, and then I'll go into a little more detail on how the board will act depending on the CPU that you have installed. So first off, we've got silver heat sinks on the B450 chipset, as well as a little one here for some CPU VRM cooling. We've got a 4-pin CPU connector up there for the CPU power, as well as our CPU socket. We've got 2 DIMM slots here for DDR4. We've got a 24-pin motherboard power connector there. There are 3 fan headers. There's a 4-pin here, a 4-pin here, and then a 3-pin down here for fan headers. We've got a M.2 connector right here, as well as a PCI Express by 1, and then a full-size by 16 slot. There's a USB 3 front panel header up here, as well as 2 USB 2.0 front panel headers there. We've got 4 SATA 6 gigabit a second ports. 2 are right angled down here, and then these 2 at the bottom are protruding straight up. We've got a front panel connectors here for the power reset and LEDs in the front. There's a LPT1, so if you wanted to hook up a printer port, you could use a printer port on this motherboard. We've also got a COM port right here, and ending it out, we've got our front panel audio. Now I'm going to get in a little more specifics on the RAM and the PCI Express connectivity. So for the RAM support, as you can see, we've got 2 DIMM slots here. Each one will support up to 3200 megahertz RAM in 16 gigabyte each quantities, so you could have up to 32 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz RAM supported on this board. Maybe a little further with overclocking, but that is what the board is listing as being supported. So that will round out the RAM. Now let's move on to PCI Express. So for PCI Express connectivity, before I mentioned that we have a by 1 and a by 16 on the board, as well as the M.2 PCI Express connection for storage. So how this will work here is this is obviously always going to be by 1, and this one is going to be by 16 when using a CPU by a Ryzen CPU. But if you're using a Ryzen APU, then this is going to run at by 8, so you'll reduce some of the bandwidth here available on this slot. Not that it makes a huge difference, but by 8 is marginally slower than running a by 16. So yeah, so CPUs by 16, APUs, this will be by 8. And then on our Ultra M.2, it supports SATA 6 gigabit a second or PCI Express with 4 lanes available. No matter what CPU or APU that you're using, you'll end up with 4 PCI Express lanes if you use a NVMe drive. So that will round out the PCI Express functionality. And I also wanted to point out too that RAID is supported on the SATA 6 gigabit a second ports over here on the bottom right, so you can use RAID, a RAID setup out of those. So now let's take a look at the rear I/O. So for our rear connectivity, we've got a combo PS2 port there for mouse or keyboard. We've got two USB 2.0 ports on top of that. We've got a DVI, a VGA, and an HDMI out. Now do keep in mind you will need a Ryzen APU in order to get the graphics out, as the Ryzen CPUs do not support integrated graphics. So these will only matter with a APU. Then we have four USB 3.1 Gen 1 ports there, as well as a Realtek Gigabit Ethernet above that, and then we have our audio out there on the far right. So for my final thoughts on this board, I would recommend this board for it'd be a very kind of a budget gaming or just a budget home PC workstation computer. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of some of the higher end models, but this board was also very affordable as well too. So getting into computing or getting into gaming, this thing would not be terrible at all. I don't think I would pair it with an R7 or an R9 if the BIOS would support the 3000 series, but an R3, R5, or even one of the APUs would be a good pairing with this motherboard. But it does also still have a lot of the features too. You know, we've got a single M.2 slot. Now some of the other boards may have two of them, you know, but still we've got the single. You know, you can obviously put a graphics card in here. You can get up to 32 gigs of RAM, although I think that would be overkill on a board like this. But we've also got plenty of SATA ports. I mean, there's the connectivity is definitely here. The power provided for the CPU and the VRMs would be able to handle a mild overclock, although I don't think you would want to go crazy with it. But yeah, overall this is a budget motherboard that probably would work for most people starting out and looking to build something under the under $800-700 PC. So anyway, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section below, and I will help where I can. And as always, thank you for watching.